Hello and welcome to Counterpoint. I'm your guest host, Michelle Simard, and today's show is about the current events of September 2022. Today we have Elliot Hughes, Senior Advisor for Summa Strategies, and Hannah Salamon-Vegh, political commentator, writer, and activist. Welcome, Elliot and Hannah.
Thank you for having us.
Hello.
Yes, so this month has been a very interesting month in regards to news stories. We had the death of Britain's and the Commonwealth's longest reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, and her passing and the coronation of Charles as the new king has no doubt sparked a lot of dinner table conversations about Canada's relationship with the monarchy. Elliot, what are your reflections on the Queen's death?
Well, look, I mean, she led a pretty incredible life, incredible amount of service, dedicated herself from the first day that she, came to the crown and came to the throne. She made it very clear that she was going to be dedicating her life to this and certainly lived up to that. Look, I mean, I think it's a bit challenging. I mean, there are some folks out there who I think have some struggles with the monarchy and just the general relationship that it has with their own countries, Canada included. But I think particularly of some Caribbean countries, who are looking at potentially sort of eyeing the exit, so to speak, of the Commonwealth, and understandably so. I mean, the Brits weren't exactly perfect when it comes to the last several decades and how they ruled. And so, for me, it's trying to separate the individual with the institution, in a sense. And it can be a bit conflicting. But I think today, particularly on the day of her funeral, I think it's important to remember the service that she provided in an individual capacity rather than the institution itself.
I agree with you. I think it's a very valid point to separate the monarch from the actual institution because, as we've seen, there have been so many monarchs who, have not done a particularly good job. And I think many people feel that Queen Elizabeth II did an absolute excellent job. So thank you for bringing that point up because I think it's very valuable. However, there are still going to be issues about the monarchy in and of itself and what it means for Canadians and the rest of the people within the Commonwealth. Hannah, what are your thoughts on the monarch's passing?
Yeah, so I definitely, it's a sad time for a lot of people. And she gave 70 years of her life and 214 days to serving the people of the Commonwealth. And it's just very interesting because she became queen at age 25. I just turned 26, and it's astonishing. Many people in our 20s, we can hardly manage our own lives, let alone take on the responsibility of being the monarch of a nation, because her father died very young, and I was just kind of thrust upon her. And just the way that she took the responsibility, the way that she took it seriously and said that she'd be dedicating her entire life, whether short or long, to serving her people, is very admirable. And it's very different, I would say, than the way Prince Harry and Meghan have conducted themselves. In the sense, they still want the royal titles, but they want to be able to trash the royal family at the same time. They want the benefits of both sides. And I do think it kind of contrasts in the way she has served the country and the way kind of people of our generation, the younger generation, view service. And it's more about what can I get out of things instead of what I can give to my country.
And how do you both feel about Charles as the monarch? Elliot?
Yeah, I think Charles is going to be a very different king from what Queen Elizabeth was as queen. I think we should expect a very sort of sharp change. I don't think that's going to come today or tomorrow. It's going to take some time for it to evolve. But I think it's going to be a very different type of leadership from Charles. The temperament, I think you can see right away, is very different between the two. Just the way kind of Charles holds himself and so on. I think the biggest difference is going to be the fact that Charles is much older than Queen Elizabeth was when she sort of took it over, and so that dynamic is going to be very interesting to watch. I suspect it's going to be a very different reign, a very different type of leadership, and it'll be interesting to see how people react to that different type of leadership as well.
Yes, I totally agree with you on the fact that it's a very different dynamic. You had one monarch who was quite young, like as Hannah said, just at the young age of 25, and that's when people are starting off their life. And then now you have a monarch who is in his 70s, who has wisdom and has a lot of guidance. So at the end of the day, it'll be very different. But we've also seen that Charles has been politically motivated in many years. But given his last throne speech, we've seen that he may put that aside. That being said, I do want to talk about the particulars, but unfortunately, we have to take a break. Welcome back. We're here with Hannah Salamon-Vegh and Elliot Hughes. And we were previously talking about, Queen Elizabeth II's recent death and what it means for Canada. And while it could make a change, that's yet to be determined. But in the interim, I think we should talk about what's happening right now in Canada. As we know, Pierre Poilievre was chosen as the new leader for the Conservative Party of Canada by a landslide victory within the party. Hannah, what do you think of the win?
Well, it's definitely signaling that I think a lot of Canadians are upset with Justin Trudeau. They're upset with the amount of inflation, broken promises, government spending out of control. They're just basic things that people cannot afford. Many people are living paycheck to paycheck. They cannot afford to feed themselves or their kids. They can't afford a place to rent, let alone buy. These are real world issues that the Trudeau government said that they were going to solve. That they're going to make living more affordable. I mean, if you look on Justin Trudeau's Instagram page, he keeps saying, we're making life more affordable for Canadians. I don't know in what world he's living, especially when he can bill $12,000 extra, for food and things like that for his house to the Canadian taxpayers. And when it comes to Pierre's win, I think it's showing that Canadians are desperate for a change. I would say that at the same time, it's important for us, Conservative Party members, those who are Conservative Party members, and those who are thinking of voting for him in the election, to hold him accountable to everything that he's promised, right? Because there's a lot of people holding high hopes on him. And because he said he's going to overturn, a lot of the damage that Trudeau has done. But Pierre did not speak out against the lockdowns or against the vaccine mandates until it was popular to do so. He did a great job as a shadow finance minister to hold the government financially accountable as much as he could. But when it comes to, vaccine issues and lockdown issues, he did not speak out until they're popular. So that's some people are raising comments of is he just holding this tide and just doing what's popular? And will he follow through with his promises if he gets elected? That is what I'm looking to see.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting take because, when Trudeau was running to become leader, everybody looked at him as the new hope. And he had the name because, at the end of the day, who would ever want a drama teacher to be head of a political party, nonetheless a Prime Minister of Canada? But he had hope given his name. And at the end of the day, I think people have seen where their hope is gone. And like you said, people are struggling, and clearly his family and him are not struggling. So it begs to differ, whereas Mr. Poilievre comes from a different background. He comes from the everyday person who's definitely had some issues within himself growing up. And here he is now leading the largest party in the entire history of Canada. So, Elliot, what are your thoughts on Pierre's victory?
Well, I think Pierre's victory is a signal that the Conservative Party of Canada is very much behind Pierre Poilievre. This is Pierre Poilievre's party now. He won an overwhelming majority of the vote. It wasn't really a leadership race. It was a coronation. Speaking of the royal family stuff, this was a coronation, and so the party that is going to go to Canadians, so Pierre is going to go in front of Canadians and sort of, make his play. This is going to be very purely about sort of like what the Conservatives believe in the Pierre Poilievre mold versus what the Trudeau Liberals sort of believe and taking it to Canadians. It'll be interesting to see. I think some polling today from Abacus Data has Pierre Poilievre up 5% on the Liberals. I think this is the honeymoon phase. This is the sort of the easy part for Pierre Poilievre. But look, it's going to get harder for him. He's going to have to start deciding if he wants to cut the deficit and sort of reduce spending. You've got to explain to Canadians where that's going to come from. Is it going to come from healthcare? Is it going to come from sort of taking it away from the middle class, the Canada Child Benefit? What are you going to do? Take away from national defense? How are you going to trim the deficit? So things like this are going to be questions that are going to be posed to Pierre Poilievre at some point. He's going to have to answer them. He's going to have to be straight with Canadians. That's when things are going to get interesting. That's when things are going to get sort of the lines will start to be drawn. What kind of government does Pierre Poilievre want? Does he want a government for the middle class, or does he just want to cut the public sector and he wants to cut supports for Canadians. If he does, and that's what Canadians want, then they'll vote for him. But I think there's going to be a big question as to whether or not that's in fact what Canadians want when it comes to election time.
Because in the last election, I think that it was hard to discern the difference. And what you believe now is that a line will be drawn and there could be a distinction.
Yeah, just quickly, just on that, I'm sure Hannah wants to jump in on that. But this is going to be a very clear-cut election. It's going to be, you're going to vote for someone who's progressive and support sort of middle-class families by providing them supports, or you're going to, support someone who's going to want to cut government, who's going to want to cut programs, he's going to want to sort of, get to a bottom line, reduce the deficit, reduce the debt, so on. Which candidate do you want? That's going to be the choice of the next election.
Welcome back. We're here with Hannah Salamon-Vegh and Elliot Hughes, and we'll be discussing a lot of the current events that's been happening right now in September 2022. And one of the recent things that I would like to discuss is the war in Ukraine. It's been all over the media and it's been talked about, but frankly, the specifics and details do matter. Because for us, I think many of the people who are out there, it's like, oh, it's a never-ending, war. But it's been over 6 months, and the war in Ukraine is still going. Ukraine is successful in pushing Russia back. However, the casualty rate keeps increasing. Elliot, what do you think of the war right now?
Well, look, I think we're entering the kind of the tough part of the war. This is where Putin, I think, wanted to get to, which is we're entering winter in Western Europe. Western Europe is highly dependent on Russian oil and gas for heating. I think Putin's hope is that the Western alliance, NATO partners that split and start to peel off in their sort of hardened, I would say, surprising support and stance against Russia so far. So I would say as terrible as it's been the first 6 months, the next 6 months are going to be even tougher and even harder on both the people of Ukraine and also on the alliance itself holding together against Putin and Russia, and seeing whether or not they're going to start to break apart, or they're going to stick together and sort of continue to support the country as it goes through some very, very difficult times the next couple of months.
I agree, and the word support is obviously a euphemism now, because Ukraine wants support, full on, a declaration, but the Western world is not willing to give it yet. They're willing to give supplies and moral support, but they really can't give the true support that Ukraine wants. Hannah, what are your thoughts on what's happening in Ukraine?
What's happening in Ukraine is incredibly heartbreaking on many levels, and it shows again that always the people, the small people, the peasants, the normal people always suffer when politicians play politics with our lives. And it's not the warlords that are suffering. War is a big money-making industry. So it's the little people that suffer. These are the people that are having their houses blown up. I follow some of these people online. A woman 9 months pregnant having to flee out of Ukraine to go into Hungary to give birth to her baby. Those are the types of things that happen when politicians and their ivory towers decide that they want to, fight over oil and gas or whatever they're doing, gain more land, things like that. But I don't believe any of this would be happening if Trump was still in power. There were no new wars under Trump, and the Biden administration is incredibly weak. We saw what happened in Afghanistan. We see what's happening now in Ukraine, even potentially what could be happening in Taiwan. These things are all happening. And these other superpowers in the world feel empowered because the U.S. government is so weak right now under Biden.
So, interesting point, but how long do you think the war will last? Because as you said, Hannah, you feel that, this is just, it's time writing. Now that the winter's going to be coming, it could last longer. How long do you possibly think this war could last?
I do think the Ukrainian forces have been stronger this time around. They were able to gain more strength and practice and everything like that after Crimea in 2014. It'll be interesting, to see what happens. U.S. has sent a ton of money there, printed money, I might add. Canada has sent a lot of money there. here in Canada and the US, we're having problems with people putting food on their plate here, let alone being able to have money to send over there. And the more you print money, the more inflation rises. It affects the stock markets, things like that. So the ripple effects are being felt everywhere. And I might add what the US is doing right now. They're blaming the situation in Russia and Ukraine. They're blaming the gas prices. And primarily the reason why the gas prices are going up is because of all the push for green energy, not so much with what's happening in Russia, but it's a popular scapegoat right now.
And Elliot, can Canadians do anything to help in this situation, or really should Canadians hone down and take care of themselves? Because as Hannah pointed out, like inflation, interest rates are gone up.
Well, Canadians can help, but just to be clear, this is all about Vladimir Putin's decision to go to war in Ukraine. This is not about Joe Biden or or Justin Trudeau or whoever. This is about a madman in power in Russia who is looking for a land grab and saw an opportunity to go. That's all this is. And this is about a terrible guy going for more land in a country that he saw as weak and he historically sees as Russian territory. And it's his war. He's causing the oil prices and gas prices to go up. This is all his making. To say that this is about green energy and trying to address climate change as the reason why oil and gas prices is crazy.
Yeah, no, Joe Biden voted to shut down the Keystone Pipeline after the war in Ukraine started.
Nothing to do with what we're saying here. This is a situation that has caused global impacts that will be felt for years.
If not generations, because I think we've seen with Trudeau.
This is not about.
It's changed.
This is way bigger than all of that.
Welcome back. We're here with Elliot Hughes and Hannah Salamon-Vegh. So thank you both of you for your commentary on the last three hot topics for the month of September. The last one I want to talk about, I think it's going to be something we're going to talk about for several months. Last week on CBS News, 60 Minutes news program, President Joe Biden was asked during the interview whether the U.S. forces, U.S. men and women, would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion. President Biden actually said yes, which was quite surprising. What do you think of the recent affirmation from President Biden? Hannah?
It's very interesting that he said that, because I'm not really sure how the U.S. would be able to defend Taiwan without having a full-blown war with China, especially because of the geographic location and things like that. But China also has tremendous influence in the U.S., in the government, in terms of, natural resources. A ton of U.S. products are made in China. I mean, the U.S. and Canada can't really exist without China, unfortunately, now. So I'm not really sure how that would play out in real life. Taiwan definitely, is under threat all the time from China. And with Nancy Pelosi visiting there, I think that heightened tensions in terms of China and Taiwan. Yes. So we'll have to see what happens.
But, on the counterpoint to, your point saying Canada and the U.S. couldn't survive without China. I mean, the counterpoint is, everybody needs a shift. And it's possible that Canada, maybe not the United States, because they have a greater population with greater demand, but it's possible that Canada could survive without China because there's many products that could be made within other countries, and we have other pacts with other countries. So it's possible. The only difference is, will it cause a problem in the supply chain? Absolutely. But perhaps this is the change that might be needed. But despite that point, what's more prevalent is the fact that, President Biden is willing to engage in war for Taiwan, yet he didn't do that for Ukraine. Elliot, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the promise to defend Taiwan goes back decades, I believe, to World War II.
Yes.
And it's a of strategic importance, particularly in today's day and age when the two great global superpowers, China and the U.S., are battling for sort of supremacy. And so the U.S. never had that security pact, so to speak, with Ukraine. They have it with Taiwan. And if the U.S. didn't live up to its word, that would not go very well around the world. And so Joe Biden was absolutely correct in saying that he would defend Taiwan and send American troops if that's what it would take. And the fact is, China is beginning to hint at potentially wanting to take over Taiwan. There's always been this sort of interesting policy that the U.S. has sort of had with Taiwan and China. But look, the U.S. has said it would defend Taiwan if China attacked it, and Joe Biden had to say what he said on 60 Minutes last week, because that's the American word. And if you don't have their word, then what do you have?
What do you stand
and
for,
so
essentially?
To me, it was exactly. And you said that you would defend them. And so if there is a threat, you need to defend them. And that's that.
Yes, because at this day and age, with all the disruptions happening in the world, the one thing that people want to hope, the last bastion of hope, is the fact that if you give your word, you'll do it. And if
That's
a
right.
small country like Taiwan has gotten its word from the US and then the US doesn't come to help, what does that say for the rest of the world?
Exactly.
And that in and of itself can cause some huge problems, because as we've seen, the world is ever changing. And now with the Queen's death, it will be ever more changing. What's going to happen next is unknown, but with the disruption of media, businesses, government, and now with the threat of possible wars and the major war in Ukraine, but let's not forget there's many wars within this world. The world is constantly changing. So I think what the most important thing in our takeaway today is this, is that people have to be vigilant. People have to pay attention. People have to know what's happening, and paying attention to current events is very important. So that being said, I want a last word from both of you. What do you think should be done in the next steps? In one word, Elliot.
Yeah, remain vigilant, but more importantly, sort of remain focused on people and supporting people as best you can.
Well said. Hannah?
Yeah, I think that it's easy to get distracted with so many issues going on in the world, and we need to care about these things. But I think we need to care about our local governments with the municipal elections coming up, paying attention to who's running, and making sure that we vote in people who actually care about putting food on the table and making sure that inflation goes down and housing becomes affordable.
Excellent point, because the only way we can help others is if we help ourselves and make ourselves strong. So thank you, both of you. And that's our time for today. So we're very happy to have both of you on the show to discuss the current events of September 2022. We look forward to having you both again, with Tanya Granick-Allen returning to the show in October. Thank you
so much.
and have a great day.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.